the leaf turns into mulch, which helps the ground. If the fruit falls to the ground and you didn't eat it, it feeds the animals around you. It feeds, everything feeds on itself and grows authentically. Well, you can do that in business as well. You can have a business that benefits you, that benefits your client, that benefits your vendors, that benefits everyone in that thrivable way, so that everything you do helps all boats rise. Everybody wins, everybody's successful. And when I think about how to design something, I go the extra length to say, how can I make money over here? But how can they make money over here? How can they make money in the middle? How can they stabilize what they're doing? It's the whole length of the way that I look at how to have everybody benefit that creates thrivability
All right.
and
Well,
credibility.
yeah, well, exactly. Well, if you help people thrive, you're going to be more credible in their eyes. You're going to be a
Zig
welcome.
Ziglar.
Oh yeah, exactly, exactly.
Hmm.
And so I'm going to call this Vickie's theory of thrivability. And
Hmm.
I love it. And one of the things you were talking about, you're if you aren't watching this on the live stream, you couldn't see Vickie kind of drawing out a line with her fingers. I'm going to take issue with that line because everything you're talking about is secular or
It
circular.
is.
It's
It is.
cyclical.
It can be cyclical, but in the process of the thinking about it, when you get an idea in your head, most people get an idea in their head and they go, "Listen, I have an idea for a business. What do you think?" So what I do is I even evaluate the idea by myself first, and I'll take it to some professionals and say, this is what I'm hoping to do. But when I put my think tank together, when I'm presenting it to my business partners, when I'm presenting it to my mentors, we are pulling it apart and saying, this is where you're going to benefit. This is where they're going to benefit. This is how they're going to benefit. And I don't mean just in a way like if we take on a client over here and we teach them how to do the business and set up a business or an online business, we're going to show them exactly how to make money with their business as well. We're not just going to say, this is how you learn to make an email list. Good luck. We actually want to completely take them through the process over the finish line so that everybody wins. And I really believe that that kind of concept in business is what creates strong companies. And you can see like Amazon is a how can everybody win? How can we make things less expensive? How can we bring more people on to the Amazon platform and have them have their own home business? How can we? It's the thinking thought that creates the thrivable business. And I think that's the future, actually. I really believe thrivability is the future.
So if I get this correctly, thrivability, your definition of it, it includes sustainability, it
Hmm.
includes scalability, it
Yep.
includes provable success in the form of
Hmm.
engagements, sales, whatever. And when you
It's
are dealing,
regenerative as well.
yeah, regenerative. That's a
Hmm.
great word to add to it. And I think that's key because I know we talked about this on your podcast. There are a lot of guru wannabe, just this side of snake oil salesmen, and some of them,
Yeah.
frankly, are selling snake oil,
Oh, yeah.
and they
Hmm.
want to sell you 3 pounds of SEO today that'll turn you into a six-figure, person within three
In
weeks.
24 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get
exactly.
that. Yeah.
And I think that people who are old enough to have been around the block on this
Hmm.
third rock from the sun long enough
Hmm.
have grown tired and wary of that stuff a long time ago. But there's an entire couple generations below us that are totally buying into I need to be an influencer like someone who's like a
Oh, yeah.
Kardashian, like your favorite
It's
flavor of
totally
Kardashian.
true. Yeah.
And they are seeing the wrong side of personal branding when it comes to building their
Absolutely.
brand.
Yes, because personal branding, I believe, is built over time. Part of your reputation is your personal brand. Part of, it's like if you are trying to write your first book and you say, well, will you co-write a book with me? You're probably going to get a lot of no's. I don't have time. But 40 books later, if you say, hey, are you interested in writing a book with me? You've already proven yourself. It's that later, the compounding that happens with personal branding when it's done correctly. It may be front end loaded, but it is back end profitable. It's back end influence. And that's the thing you want to protect the most is your reputation. Who are you as an influencer? What do you stand for? What are your values? And those are the things that have to stand the test of time.
Oh man, I love that. I love that whole idea that you just laid out there about it. The things that are hard to do, that are front end loaded, that require a lot of blood, sweat, and tears early on, they
Yeah,
have tremendous long tail back end benefits. But
absolutely.
a lot of people don't see that. They don't want that. You know, the fact is, and you probably know this figure as well as I do, people start podcasts and most of them stop before
Yeah,
they hit
like
7 episodes.
12. Yeah.
Yeah, seven
So
or
it's like
12.
there's a, yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
well,
that the consistency is important. That's part of your brand,
yeah,
you know?
and you certainly know that. I mean, you've got a lot of podcast presence, and I mean, here's the funny thing. Okay, I just want to set this up so that listeners know why I'm so kind of in awe of what you're doing. She's based in Crestone, Colorado. Now, anyone who knows
Yeah.
Colorado knows it's a beautiful part of Colorado. But as I said on your podcast,
I'm
it's
definitely way in the mountains. I'm way in the
yeah,
mountains.
yeah. I mean,
Although I don't want that spread all over the internet where this is where she lives, because I've had people come and knock on my door that I don't know.
okay, well, I'll cut that out, to be
Thank
honest.
you.
Let me
Thank
put it
you.
this way. Let me restart it by saying I want to talk about why I'm so impressed with Vickie because she has chosen to live the life she wants to live, where she wants to live it. And he did it long before the kind of van
Yeah.
lifers, long before the
Hmm.
sailing la
Yep.
vagabond people that,
Yeah.
the 20
Sailing
year
the
olds.
Vagabond.
Oh,
Now we have something in common. I love them.
I do too. And the funny
Yeah.
thing is, they're showing people a life and lifestyle that's totally based on who they are, what they do, and how they do it. And they're
Yep.
sharing everything and yet not. I mean, I know the
Yeah.
fact that they were stuck in Australia with COVID and they're building a boat in Vietnam and they're having
Mhm.
trouble getting that, blah, blah. I know all this stuff, but I don't know everything. I feel like I know them like friends, but
Yeah.
they're
That's
still
the
in,
beauty of that, isn't it?
yeah, well, but
And
they're
to me,
still in
that kind of
control.
transparency is part of personal branding. That being transparent. We talked about that on my podcast as well. You made reference to Patrick Flynn on the passive income, his podcast, which is really about that kind of thrivability through transparency. That is a beautiful gateway.
Yeah, but again, and one of the things I think we talked about on your podcast was, but you've got to be selective in just how authentic you are. Because
Yes,
again, you don't know my favorite sports teams or the fact that I don't have any. Well, I'm pretty open about that. I don't follow sports, not interested. But if I were to
that's
talk to
good.
you, yeah, if I was to talk to you about my favorite bands or music styles and stuff like that, that would be great if it were in my kind of personal brand wheelhouse. If I had a blog that was more about music and performance and maybe guitars and stuff like that, I could go into tons of detail about that. And I can even
Yeah.
point to people I follow specifically because they are doing such a great job authentically sharing who they are, their musical tastes, why they play this guitar, why this amp, why this new guitar pedal. And they'll go into great detail about it. And yet I don't know where they live. I don't know how they
That's
vote.
right.
I
That's
don't
right.
know if they have dogs or cats. It doesn't matter because to me, I'm getting what I feel like is 100% authenticity from them. but in a narrow slice of their life, or a relatively narrow slice of
That's
their
so
life.
important. That's so important. You know what's interesting about what you're saying that I think is very important is because there's a difference between being authentic and oversharing. And
Amen.
so when you're talking on your podcast, and maybe you're talking about music, and I have a feeling we'd have a lot in common, but let's say we're talking about music and we're talking about guitars and this and that and the other. Well, we don't actually need you to be so transparent that you're telling us about your divorce over here or airing out dirty laundry that may not be there. Transparency and authenticity does have some I don't want to say professionalism, but that's a word that most usually has in there as we do that. When you're talking about things in that area, the object for the audience or what you're doing or how you're talking about your personal brand doesn't mean that you have to uncover everything. But I do know that when I am sharing a story that's personal to me, I definitely want to be open, warts and all. Like, here's the mistake I made when I did this business. I didn't make it over here. Here's where I was really successful. I did this and it worked for me. Or I did this, but it's not available anymore because we're now online or we have this technology that does it. Any of those things you want to be open about, true. And I think there's a level of respect, dignity, and decorum that people can have in their brand where they are highlighting authenticity without dirty laundry or anything else. And I think there is a lot of value, absolute value in that kind of self branding because, everybody has that BS detector. They know whether you're going to be schmoozing them or actually really sincerely caring about what you're sharing with them in the best way. And that's what's really great about Pat Flynn, isn't it? That's what he was so good at. And he was probably some of the first people that first person who did that, where he was very clear. He was like, okay, I had this job, I studied for this thing and I passed, but then I got laid off and what was I going to do? I have a family to take care of and I put up my online business and I'm going to show you exactly what I did in detail. I'm going to show you exactly what I did to get there in a very transparent way. And to me, that's what solidified his brand was his transparency and his authenticity over a long period of time. And
Well,
if he
and
screwed up, would tell you.
yeah, well, exactly. But it all fed into the original founding narrative or the
That's right.
truth of
The
who he is
narrative.
because again, I guess I call him a student of Pat Flynn. I mean, when I heard
Mhm.
his, I don't know, episode number 54, I went back to all the way to episode 1 because it was so good. I wanted to listen forward. And here's one of the cool things about podcasting. Every time you do a podcast, you drop a little hint about who you are, what's important to you, little stories about this,
Absolutely.
that. You might mention a spouse or a dog or something like that.
Yeah, you want to say like I have dogs and I like this sport and this is great. Yeah.
Exactly. And like Pat Flynn, when you're telling his story, I'm going, that's right. That's right. He was studying for the architecture lead certification
That's
exam,
right.
and he had to aggregate all these loose pieces of digital content in order to study for it. And he thought to himself, this could be a digital
Smart man.
product.
Mhm.
I know that story. You know that story. Anyone who listens to his podcast knows that story because he was completely transparent about that and things like being laid off and the difficulties and all this stuff. That builds credibility because, again, we're talking about earlier about the guru wannabes where everything's just magical. I've got 5 ways for you to make 6 figures in 2 days. Yeah, right. These guys
Yeah,
are absolutely snake oil. But when someone like Pat Flynn and yourself talk about your challenges, what you're doing is you're building credibility, not because you're an expert, that in some ivory tower. You're an
mhm.
expert who is in the ditch, who had to dig themselves out of it
That's
and
right.
turn around and go, wow, I never want to do that again, but I found some
That's
valuable
right.
stuff that I would like to share with other people. And the funny thing is, I was talking to another guest on my podcast about this who had very severe money problems. Guess what she does now? She does financial coaching
Of
for
course.
women, primarily women of color, because they are,
Mhm.
what is it, 80% of African American women are the breadwinners of their household, and
Wow.
most of
Wow.
them don't have any financial background whatsoever.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is, but she can talk to those people
Yeah,
because
she
she
can because she's
was
been there,
that
done that.
person. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
exactly. And so, what the light bulb that went off for me when I talked to her was that, oh, I always thought credibility had to be some advanced certification or an MBA or a
Oh,
CPA
yeah, a
or
lot of people think it's that. Let me
no,
tell
it's
you, if you have a good school of hard knocks story, there is nothing better than that.
yeah,
You know, you've been through it.
especially because everybody's had those hard knocks. And
Mhm.
if anything, you have way more credibility if you can tell me how bad it was for you, because
And
I'll
how
go, oh,
painful
then
it
you
was.
totally understand how ashamed I feel.
Mhm.
Because if all of a sudden I'm no longer feeling ashamed because I know that you were there too, then you can help me out of the big first obstacle, which is accepting and acknowledging that I'm in a bad place and I need help.
You know,
It's
that's so important. That it to me, it's like that's the heart of entrepreneurship right there. The reason you tell people what you tell them is because you don't want them to experience or go through the hardship you went through. So you give that tip or you give that tool or you say, do it this way. This is part of the mentorship that you can give after you've, gone through the fire and built what you wanted to build. And I want to be really clear with everybody. Part of your personal brand, the biggest part of your personal brand is you loving and enjoying the thing that you wanted to do. So, for instance, we just talked about the Vagabond, which is a YouTube couple who sail around the world. They circumnavigate on a boat, and their lifestyle is that. Now, in that lifestyle that they live, that's the thing that I really chose. I wanted to continue working because I don't see work as painful. I see work as contribution now. Now, if I work for somebody else and I'm, a paycheck slave, that would be painful. But when you're creating things that you want to create, living the way you want to live, contributing the way you want to contribute, and getting remunerated for that, that's a completely different lifestyle. And when you get to the point where you're at that place, you have the opportunity to share with others how you got there. So, for instance, I live in the Colorado mountains. Why? Because I love and I do like sailboats a lot. I've owned two, but I love mountain biking. I love it. And I love hiking. And I love living where I don't have to mow the lawns. And I love a certain lifestyle that I have. I love the outdoor piece of it. But I also love to listen to the quiet. And I don't want to hear the ambulances roar or the roar of traffic during rush hour. I don't want to be in traffic in rush hour. But whatever your slice of pie is, I know that people tell you that you need to have a Lamborghini and a McMansion and maybe a private airplane or one that has your initials on the back of the plane, or maybe you need to do all these things to support success. And I remember in my younger years, I did that. I bought into that. I was like, and real estate was big back then, real estate investing. And what I found out was I don't really like managing properties or real estate, and I don't want to deal with that. I had to sell it all and get rid of it. You want to find your definition of what happiness is, your definition of what contribution is, and you would be surprised. As little as 250,000 a year to 400,000 a year, and some people even less than that, like 100,000 a year and less, they have all the happiness and monetary means they need to give them the successful lifestyle they want. A lot of people have the $100,000 to $200,000 lifestyle because they want to do more with their family. They're like, I want to take my kids to Orlando and see Disney World. I want to go on those great vacations with my kids. I want to be home with my kids. Or you want to raise them instead of working your butt off for somebody else to pay them to raise your kids. There's a point where your lifestyle has to be chosen by you, and it's not going to look like all the other things out there. It's going to look like how you design it. Part of the first seed you want to plant in your forest or garden of thrivability and personal brand is what you personally want to experience, what you personally want to do, what you personally love, who you personally love. Before you die, that's what you want to figure out and plant that. That's
Amen.
happiness.
Oh my gosh. As you can see, I love talking with Vickie because of exactly this. I like to call it, I've got a couple of concepts when I talk to people. I like to ask them a couple of very simple questions that are incredibly hard to answer. One, what is your yardstick? Meaning, how do you
That's
measure
great.
your life? What's important to you? What's truly important to you? And we talk about that, blah, blah, blah. The other one is the bumper sticker that frequent listeners to this podcast will have heard me say 100 times. Know who you are so you can be it. A lot
That's
of
right.
people are trying to be something without doing the first part, which is knowing who they are. You
Or
mentioned,
accepting who they are.
yeah,
Some of you
exactly.
know who you are, but you won't accept who you are, and you won't accept what you like because it doesn't fit into the norm.
Well, you can see that Vickie and I have a lot to talk about, and we're going to do a lot more talking about this next week. But for now, I want to say, Vickie, do you have a social media channel that you prefer to engage with people on, or how can people get engaged with you?
Well, there's always VickieHelm.com, but it's spelled Vickie, VickieHelm.com. You can find me there. And you can find me on Facebook right there at VickieHelm.com. There's also the Success Secrets for Business, Family, and Life channel, or the University channel on Facebook as well.
Well, there you go. And also, I'd love for people to know your podcast, Mini Empire. If people wanted to hear more from you with guests that you carefully curate, where can they find that podcast and what is the name of it?
Well, it's the Coffee Break Show. And if you go to VickieHelm.com, there is a link to the Coffee Break Show. If you're in Facebook or you're in YouTube or you're in iHeartRadio, if you're in Amazon TV, wherever you are, just put in the Coffee Break Show with Vickie Helm and I will pop up. I will pop up. Even if you just go into Google and type, the Coffee Break Show with Vickie Helm, I'll pop up.
Well, there you go. And the whole thing is, I've kind of teased the fact she's got an empire here that's growing leaps and bounds. There's a community there. So if you want to join that community, get involved with it, the first step kind of into the ocean of goodness that is Vickie Helm, you can find at VickieHelm.com. That's Vickie, VickieHelm.com. Go check out everything about her there, and definitely check out her Coffee Break Show podcast too. It's available at all the local usual suspects, right?
Everywhere. Yeah. It's everywhere. Just type it in anywhere. It'll pop up.
All right. Well, that's it for this week on the Nonfiction Brand podcast. I'm going to say that again. Well, that's it for this week on the Nonfiction Brand podcast. I'd love for you to like, subscribe, refer this podcast to others, but most of all, can you do me a solid and review it? It really does help other people find it. And thank you in advance for that. I'm DP Knudten, your friendly host, and she is
Vickie Helm.
And we'll be talking at you again next week. Bye-bye. Pause. All right, so you started talking about some very important things last week that I want to go deeper into right now. And a lot of it has to do with what I think of as self-discovery, true self-discovery. When you can say about yourself, like you did last week, that I don't want to live someplace with sirens going by or honking horns. I want to enjoy the silence. Do you know how many people would love that, but never have thought about the fact that part of the reason they're so stressed out is the fact that they hear sirens and they hear traffic and they can't hear birds, and there's never a time where you just sit on a deck with a cup of coffee and listen to the wind in the spruce trees? That is my definition of perfect peace. I know that about myself, but a lot of people haven't done that kind of self-knowledge, self-discovery
It's true.
to know that. You obviously did quite a while ago.
Mhm.
Can you talk us into that? I mean, you mentioned the
Oh,
fact that
yeah.
you've been in
I
business and for a long time, but
Mhm.
you've migrated out of what I think is probably where you started.
Yeah, it did.
Well, talk
It's
about
so
that. Give us a
interesting.
little bit of detail about that.
Sure, I have a long history of being very spiritual even as a young person, and so from, I'd say, about 12 years old, my quest for spirituality and learning those things were, at my cross. So the first thing about me is that from the time I'm about 12, really, I would say 14 years old, I've read nonfiction books only. I think the only fiction books I've ever read were Harry Potter series. And I think that's nonfiction put into a fiction story, which I really like. And I've always done self development from 14, one book a week. And, I started with Wayne Dyer's Your Erroneous Owns way back when. And then I read voraciously all my life. And inside that reading, there was a lot of things that helped me have introspection in my teen years. And from that introspection, there was a way that they taught me how to introspect, which isn't really taught in schools or things. So, of course, I did some advanced studies. I have done a lot of Buddhism and Shambhala training, and I did Landmark back when it was est and I was in high school. I've done, all the Anthony Robbins things as well. But then I went even a little deeper, and I've been trained by 5 different shamans in 5 different disciplines, if you will. And then also, I have a degree from the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. So my whole background is, and my two loves are business and spirituality, because the reason business is so important in the self development field is that anytime you start something, a new idea or something, the thing that has been blocking you your whole life is the first thing that comes up. So you actually get a good mirror in your face of the thing that's actually blocking you as to why you haven't achieved what you wanted to achieve, do what you wanted to do. And you can either confront it, or what I like, Lisa Nichols says, carefrontationally, look at it and pull it apart and, have a different experience. One of the most important things that I learned in the shaman traditions is they have these things about bending reality and or what I call shaping reality, but they also have something called shape shifting. And that shape shifting is the ability to shift. And in the back folklore, it's about shifting into an animal. But the truth is, it's about being able to shift your reality from one reality that you're in to the reality that you want to have. And I always love to use Arnold Schwarzenegger because everybody knows him. He's a big A-list actor. And with Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was able to shift his reality and his career life several times. So, born in Austria, wanted to become an American. He came over to America. He had his gyms. And from his gym, he decided, well, I'm going to become an author. And he became a best-selling author. And then he decided, well, now I'm going to become an A-list movie star. I want to do movies. So we went from being a gym rat to now an A-lister movie star. And then he was like, well, I've done what I wanted in this career. So now I'm going to transform into politics. And so then he went into politics, obviously from another country, but still the governor of California. And what ends up happening when you have the ability to shift, it's like if you want outer world success, then you need to start with your inner world first. And I just happen to be in the inner world first and learn to create the outer world from my inner world. That's how I got that lucky, you know.
Well, that's fascinating to me because one of the things that I always try to impress upon people about building a personal brand is the stuff I'm interested in is the pivot point, the truth that you will not vary from. Now, what I mean by
Mhm.
that is exactly what you just described, which was if you described Arnold Schwarzenegger as an actor, you'd be partially right. If you
Mm-hmm.
described him as a
That's
gym
right.
owner, you'd be partially right.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not getting the whole thing. That's not his true self. The point
Mm-hmm.
on which he pivots is looking, and I don't know, I haven't read his biographies and stuff like that, just based on my observation of him as a human being, he has a discipline that is core to who he is, whether he's a
Yeah.
writer, gym owner, weightlifter, A-list star,
Mm-hmm.
politician. Discipline. And again,
Yeah.
I think of, again, it's kind of funny. We're talking about an Austrian named Schwarzenegger. Immediately, a Samoan American comes to my mind too, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Same. I mean, you. How remote is American Samoa from the white
Yeah.
hot center of where things
Yeah.
are
You're
happening?
right.
And yet, this guy, just like Schwarzenegger, and again, it's not about WWE or whatever they're calling it this week. It's not about wrestling. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about the core of who he is. The dude gets up at 4 a.m. every single day and works out for 2 hours before he does anything else. And so
Yeah.
it's this core of discipline and determination. These are the things that define both of these gentlemen's personal brands. And consequently, they don't vary from that pivot point, but they do pivot. That's the thing.
Yeah.
When
They're
you're,
able to manifest the vision they have. And that's the thing. I want to dive a little deeper down the rabbit hole of this because I think it's so important. One of the things that we have is we have the ability to, it's like we've let some of our inner abilities atrophy. So the ability to discern, the ability to have inner peace, or the ability to listen inwardly and follow that and surrender to it. It's like once you tap into the thing that you actually want to do, then the mind screen, or what you would call the imagination, or visualizing it here, is a way for us to get the big picture of what we want. And we have so many distractions outwardly that tell us, well, write your goals down, we'll write this, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do this. And you're following a set of principles instead of following your own inner principles. And the thing is, you can't shift something else with somebody else's rules. You've got to go in and get your rules for shifting. And that's a personal journey. That's the hero's journey. So the first time you have a dream, which I imagine for whether it was Wayne the Rock Johnson or Arnold Schwarzenegger, there must have been a time when they were little boys dreaming of going to America, dreaming over, and decades of dreaming. I mean, there's nobody who's great in this world who didn't just picture it over and over again. You know, if you take a look at any NBA star, yes, did they put in the hours doing layups and practicing, and they're just doing all these things over and over again? Yes, Eddie Van Halen on the piano over and over and over again before he played the drums, actually, before he picked up the guitar. But there is that willingness to put in the effort, the discipline comes from the passion you have about doing something. If you are doing somebody else's bidding, if you are doing somebody else's theory, if you're doing somebody else's thing, you cannot feel discipline. You only feel like you're being pushed or tortured or traumatized by it. Passion comes from you implementing something that you're passionate about. Then discipline becomes something that is not painful, but promising. It's the promise that's going to bring you the desired result you want. And that mindset shift is what helps you manifest the thing you want. It's like these athletes, they manifest with joy, not with arduousness. It's joy for them to continue what they're doing. I
yeah,
know it is
well,
for me too.
yeah. It is so funny you bring up Eddie Van Halen because,
I love him. And
oh,
I see the guitars.
well, and I'll be honest with you. I love him as a player. That style of music, maybe not my ultimate cup of tea, but that doesn't matter because as a player, even a really poor player like me, you can't help but respect the technical virtuosity of the guy. Now,
Absolutely.
a lot of people would say Eddie Van Halen, if you were just to describe his personal brand, it centered around guitar, rock music, long hair, all that stuff. And I would say, no, 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 no. Those are tools. Those are trappings.
That's how
Those
we got out. That's right. That's the outward show of the inward person. I
the
agree with
inner.
that.
If you know enough about Eddie Van Halen, you know one of the key words that describe him is invention. He invented his guitar sound. He invented
That's right.
his guitar in terms of
He
the way it was laid
disrupted
out.
the entire
He,
sound.
he invented entire new ways of playing. Even there's a thing called wax potting pickups. He was the first guy to do that on a regular basis for his guitar. And, you know, he was an inventor. Why? Because he had an idea that he didn't see anyplace else. He had to invent it. And that's why he's going to be in, you know, one of the top 10 guitarists of all time, because he's not a guitarist. He's an inventor. So that's where I say, don't define yourself by the tool you happen to use to fulfill that which you are. Eddie Van Halen
Beautiful.
used the tool of guitar, as you say. Before his brother Alex took over the drum set, he was a drummer. His dad was a musician, I think a classical musician as well.
That's right.
You know,
And
so
his mom
music was in
a
the family, but
singer.
But to call Eddie Van Halen a musician is to diminish what he actually was. He was an inventor, which is why it doesn't matter what style of guitar you play. You look at him and go, yeah, that guy's absolutely top shelf and always will be. And he was true to that inventor pivot point, because he could pivot and play different styles of music, and different style of guitar and all that stuff. But he always was inventive. And that's the key. A lot of people like to define themselves by the car they drive.
Yeah, I think it's so important what you're saying. So I want to talk to the people that are in their 20s right now. And for those of you in your 20s who are just embarking on finding out what you're passionate about, you're going to have some run-ins. One of the run-ins you're going to have is the thing you think you want to do, the thing you think you like to do over and over again. When you start doing it as a profession, you may think, I do not like to do this. So I saw an interview with Wolfgang Van Halen, which is Eddie Van Halen's son, and he's got a new album out and he's doing really great work. But he didn't originally want to be a musician. He said originally he wanted to make video games until he started the actual process of making video games. And he was like, oh gosh, I don't like to make video games. And so this is where you're going to run into. You're going to have somewhere between 20, and some people are lucky. They're like, I know I'm going to be a doctor and I'm 10 years old, and you end up being a doctor. But for those of you who are out there going, I just want to make some money so I can live free. Your value isn't just, I want to make money to live free. Your value is living free. Now, that's a big, vast thing to live free. How do you want to live free? And whether that's bike packing or sailing or having your sustainable farm or van life or whatever it is, when you venture out, you may say, this isn't the kind of freedom I wanted. You want to get clear. You'll get clearer and clearer and clearer. It doesn't mean you're a loser. It doesn't mean you're lazy. It doesn't mean you don't know what you want. It's like being at a smorgasbord in life and trying a teaspoon of some stuff. Some stuff you're going to be, oh, I love this. I'm going to eat some more of it. Some of it you're going to be like, yeah, I don't want to eat that. I don't even want to eat the second bite of it. And it's okay that you have your experience. Don't let anybody label you anything because you have your experiences and you have your choices. You do not have to follow the pack. You have to follow you.
Well, and I think that advice, it applies to people well advanced beyond the 20s, 30s, 40s even, because there are a lot of people who find themselves in a track. And what happens when you're in a track turns into a rut, and that rut is impossible to get out of. Well, and sometimes there are very good reasons for that, because Once you acquire kids and dogs and
Yep.
cars and
Yep.
mortgages, you
Yep.
don't have the flexibility. But it's not it's not unusual once you get past that life stage for people to suddenly re-blossom, to
Yeah.
re-thrive, if you will, as they discover new things. Like I talk about in my book, Nonfiction Brand, I tell the story of a high school friend of mine whose father was a pretty high performance lawyer. And he was a high performance lawyer until he turned about 50, 55, and he
Hmm.
retired. He spent the last act of his life playing clarinet in a touring Dixieland jazz band.
Nice.
Now, when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, this guy was a musician his entire life who had to make
Hmm.
his bank. So then he
Hmm.
was free to do what he wanted to. And the coolest thing, and this is what I learned from those 20-year-olds who are out there doing or questioning the standard lifestyle, they're doing what I hope to be doing as I age, but they're doing
Yeah.
it while you still have energy to do all the fun stuff. And I can't help but applaud that because, to be honest, I kind of did that. In my nebulous 20s, I was an actor. Did on camera stuff. I did improvisational comedy. I did, you name
Cool.
it, I did it. If you'd pay me to be on stage to do anything, I would do it. Other than Magic Mike, I'm just saying. Never, never quite went the full Chippendale route. But my point is, my parents were like, "When are you gonna get a job?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm
Hmm.
I'm trying all this stuff because I'll be honest. I went to get a master's degree in acting at the University of Southern California, and I didn't like the acting that you could get in Southern California. It was about who
Yeah.
it's about, you put it this way, you have to be a titanium based narcissist to succeed there. And
Wow.
that did, in spite of my ego, which a lot of people will point out is pretty healthy, I wasn't that healthy. I
Yeah.
wasn't that strong. And I realized I love this part of it, but I hate this part. If both things have
Oh,
to
yeah.
be together, I can't do that. So again, it took me a long time. I was 30 before I became an advertising copywriter. And that was because I had
Wow.
done so much voiceover work that was poorly written. I said I could do better than that. And so eventually I found a way to be able to do that. And now I've had a 30-year career because I tried all sorts of stuff. And
Yeah, you have to be flexible with yourself. I know that as an entrepreneur, I have had a lot of businesses and I have started businesses that I thought I was going to enjoy and I didn't enjoy them. So I put them up for sale. And then you start something again and you're going to find. So for instance, if somebody told me that I was going to have 40 books, I would have laughed and been like, I can't even spell. I don't know how to use the spell check in Word. And I would have never guessed that that would become a passion. There was nothing inside. I love to read, love it. And so you may learn that you have a passion you don't even know about that may be hidden behind the mask of having effort or something seeming overwhelming. Like I remember the first time I sat down to write a book, it felt overwhelming to me. Now it's, I'll have one out in 10 or 14 days if I need to. And so there's so many new opportunities right now for you to live and work and be in your happiness and not in your drudgery. Now I love baby boomers. I think they were great and they were hardworking parents, and my grandparents before that, and then grandparents before them. Right now, there's so many opportunities that we can look at if we are just willing to look at things a little bit differently and give yourself a break. There is going to be a point where you're going to work hard. Maybe you have a job and you finally just got your online business going and you're working this until this, you know, takes off. Well, make sure it takes off. It's not part time or I'll do it in my spare time because nobody has spare time, right? So you want to get to the point where you are absolutely investing in you in ways where you are discerning because you're going to start out here with the 100-foot view and you're going to discern, well, I don't like these kinds of relationships. I like these kinds of relationships. I want this lifestyle. I like to eat this kind of food. I like to venture on these kinds of adventures. I want to live this way. And pretty soon, your nutshell, where who you are, what you're about, and what you represent in the world is going to get very clear to you. But the way you do that is to experiment your way through that. You're going to have some, just like he did. He was like, well, I really like acting, but I don't like that kind of acting. And I don't want to be that kind of person to act. I'd rather do something else completely until you find another. If you're an artist in one way, trust me, hidden in you is an artist in another way. You're multidimensional in that way. That's so important to understand because he acts and evidently he plays guitar as well. So he's got some music in him too.
Well, and that's the whole thing. When I talk about understand the difference between who you are and the tools you use. And by the way,
Right.
one of the things that I preach here ad nauseum is have three concepts. I call them your key three, the key words, the key
Yes,
three
I
key
love
phrases that help you focus. And again,
Yes.
I'm a writer, so writing should be one of my words, right? No, it shouldn't, because that's not all what I do. For example, the funny thing is I'm a writer who doesn't have a blog. Why?
Yeah.
I find blogging tedious. I don't like it. And yet I'll spend 5 times as much time putting out a podcast every week.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because,
That's
I'm more
great
of a
kind of writing.
performer than I am a writer. I get paid to be a writer, but I'm really performing on paper. That's a different stage. Podcasting, it's a performance stage. All these things. But even those words don't make my cut. My 3 words, collaborative, creative, and provocative.
I loved that.
I have to work with other people because I've realized that I have to work with other people. And part of that collaboration is between the artist and the audience. An artist, there are plenty of artists who don't care if an audience ever sees it. I'm sorry, I want my audience to see what I'm doing. So there's collaboration there. The creative part, that's me saying, you know what? Don't come to me for spreadsheets or click rates or any of that stuff.
Yeah,
SEO.
really, yeah.
I don't care about SEO. I just don't. Well, I'm bad at it. Guess what? I don't have to be good at it. But other people are fantastic at it. I, however, am on the creative side of the fence. And then the third one is provocative. I always want to make people think. And I always want people to make me think, which is why I love
that.
having Vickie Helm on the Nonfiction Brand podcast. I mean, and I hate to say it, but we're getting close to the end of this episode. And I do want our listeners to be able to follow you. Where can people follow and engage with you, Vickie?
Well, they can go to vickiehelm.com, which is Vickie Helm, HELM.com. You can find me on Facebook under that same name. You can find my show, The Coffee Break Show with Vickie Helm. You can go to Google and just type The Coffee Break Show with Vickie Helm and it'll come up. I'm on every platform that you can think of, any Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Apple, any place you type me in, I'll pop up there as well. You can just type my name into Google and everything about everything, including all my Amazon books and my Facebook pages or wherever I am, will pop up as well. And you can also find me at the Freedom Seekers Way and, pop in there. That's some of the programs we do.
Well, there you go. I mean, Vickie obviously has a lot of energy, a lot of spirit, and is a great person to connect with. So I really encourage you to check her out and check out her Coffee Break Show for sure. Because if for no other reason, listen to the episode that we did together, because I think fun. it's going to be hilarious. And it was really, really fun to do. Again, I would love for you to like, subscribe, refer, and review this podcast wherever you get it, because that, believe it or not, really does help people find it. And of course, I'm your host, DP Knudten, and she is
Vickie Helm.
And I'll be seeing you or talking at you next week. Bye-bye. And we are off. I'm going to just finish.